Current temperature is 71 degrees and clear. And now traffic from Copter 4 with Brian Jones report.
It came out of nowhere, all but unbelievable in those warm and gentle days of spring.
This is not a test. This is not a test. This is a broadcast of the Emergency Broadcast System. A blizzard warning has been issued for Saturday for the New York City metropolitan area, Long Island, New Jersey, and Connecticut.
Bulletin. The National
Repeat.
Weather Service in New York has issued a blizzard warning for Saturday for northern New Jersey and southeastern New York State,
Bulletin.
including
This
Long
is a
Island.
tornado warning.
A major
issued
winter
by the
storm is
National Weather
developing
Service
over the
at 3:25 a.m.
Life-threatening weather.
The National Weather Service has issued a tornado warning effective until 4:30 a.m.
Now, what we've got right now, big area of high pressure did dominate, took over for us, and that was nice. But what we are watching is down here in the Gulf Coast, an area of low pressure getting itself together. We started telling
every
you about
indication,
it back on
tapping that moisture and then spreading it our way with a storm that will be intensifying and becoming a major East Coast storm.
My patrol car started shaking, almost like maybe 3 large football players had picked the back of the car. If I looked in my rearview mirror, there was nobody there.
I heard like a train coming through my window. I just thought everyone was dead.
And you could feel the house settling down in the water, and whenever it settled down for the last time, we all jumped.
Always heard people say that drowning was an easy way to die, and I guess I'm fixing to die.
We had one girl who kept saying, "We're gonna die, we're gonna die, we're gonna die, we're gonna die." Everybody was frightened, they were panicked.
Right now, the whole city of Atlanta is under a blizzard warning.
Here's that storm again. It's centered in northeastern Georgia, moving up towards North Carolina.
Up the eastern seaboard, Pittsburgh, also New York City.
0. Martinsburg, West Virginia feels like 17 below 0 with the wind chills. 24 to 23 below 0 up in Pittsburgh.
For us here in the Washington area, 6 to 12 inches of snow, sleet, and a changeover.
And I know it's disconcerting to hear the rumble of thunder in the middle of snow, but the storm is so powerful, really down about
some
here.
action. If you think you're looking at stuff now, you ain't seen nothing yet.
Tornadoes, thunderstorms, hurricane-force winds, a deluge of rain, and a gigantic snowstorm, the greatest in more than 100 years. It was all things terrible wrapped in one event. They called it the storm of the century. The atmosphere of planet Earth is like a giant weather engine powered by the sun. Moist, heated air rises and moves toward the poles. In response, cold Arctic air, hugging the Earth, creeps ominously towards the equator. When these two air masses collide over North America, they spawn the most violent weather on Earth. How and when this happens profoundly affects everyone. But the effort to forecast major storms has often been a tragic failure for most of our history. Back in the mid-1800s, the electric telegraph introduced the modern era of weather forecasting. Data could now be swiftly gathered and analyzed by experts in Washington. But on March 11, 1888, the Weather Service issued a forecast for fair weather that was tragically wrong. The next day, Americans woke up to the great blizzard of '88. The entire Northeast battled blinding snows and gale-force winds. Trains collided or simply froze up, trapping thousands in unheated cars. Over 400 died. Many, afraid for their jobs, froze to death trekking to and from work. In the words of one reporter, great piles of snow rose up like gigantic Arctic graves. Spurred in part by such tragedies, the Weather Bureau had a nationwide network of observers by the 1930s. But still, violent winter storms often struck the eastern United States without warning. Notoriously unpredictable, they often made a mockery of forecasts and forecasters. Today, advanced satellites keep constant watch, and a vast network of weather buoys monitors conditions at sea. Commercial aircraft provide over 30,000 observations daily. But the mainstay of data gathering remains the weather balloon. 700 are launched twice a day at precisely the same moment all over the world. This staggering amount of weather data has dramatically improved prediction. But knowing what it all means is still a tremendous challenge. Forecasts are generated here in the National Centers for Environmental Prediction in Washington. Computer models project weather data into the future, analyzing more data faster than humans ever could. But computers sometimes provide forecasts that confound their creators. In early March 1993, they predicted a storm of unparalleled intensity that wouldn't occur for several days.
We see a model forecast.
The extreme forecast was difficult to believe, but impossible to ignore.
Part of the forecast problem that we had early in this event on Monday and Tuesday was that we were dealing with models that had forecasted storms during the winter in January and February and didn't develop. This was compounded by the problem that people along the east coast of the United States didn't believe we could forecast a major snow event, especially 5, 4, and 3 days in advance. So we were charting unknown territory at that point.
Another dilemma was that 3 computer models projected 3 different storm tracks. An error of only 100 miles could mean the difference between a rainy weekend and a national emergency. And looking out the windows of the National Weather Service, it was a glorious spring day, unseasonably warm and pleasant. Some 400 miles to the southwest, in the Great Smoky Mountains, it was beautiful weather for hiking and camping. Over 100 students and teachers from a Michigan prep school set out on a 10-day expedition into the wilderness. It was part of an annual rite of passage for sophomores.
Oh, I know.
Dylan Cooper, 17, a senior, was one of the student leaders, as was Sarah Holmes, 17, another senior. For 15-year-old sophomore Danielle Swank, this would be her first venture into the Smokies.
It was a hiking trip, and we hiked every day, but it was beautiful. Everything was green. It was spring.
It was so warm, actually, that we could, you could actually go swimming. Actually, some of us went swimming in one area, which was a little cold, but it was warm enough to do that.
Our spirits were very high from the get-go, from our first day out. We had a few setbacks of people that were a little concerned and weren't too sure about this thing called the wilderness expedition.
On Wednesday, forecasters' attention was focused on 2 energy centers riding the polar and subtropical jet streams. They were headed for a rare and dangerous convergence. Each passing hour verified the computer's warning of a giant storm forming on Friday.
By Wednesday of that week, the forecasters realized that they had a major event on their hands, that they had to communicate that event to get people ready for it. Their confidence level went up to the point where special weather statements were being put out describing the storm potential in more detail than they ever had before, and in fact indicated that this could be a storm of historic proportions. But we were very nervous on this floor. We didn't want to overhype it. We didn't want to get people excited about something that might not happen. And in a very real sense, we didn't want to be wrong.
For the forecasters and the media, the pressure was on. What to tell the public and when. Over the next 72 hours, the jet streams pushed cold and warm air masses closer to a violent collision. A low formed over the Gulf of Mexico. It exploded into a crescendo of thunderstorms and lightning. Over 3,000 flashes an hour, more than had ever been recorded in a single storm.
National Geographic is sponsored.
The National Weather Service in New York has issued a blizzard warning for Saturday for northern New Jersey.
The storm of the century had begun. The Weather Service held its breath and made a fateful prediction. The storm would follow the most dangerous track. The weather was still mild, but the eastern seaboard geared up for a full-blown emergency. Some prepared for the worst. Worried and a little embarrassed, shoppers loaded up on groceries and supplies. In coastal areas, people with memories of past disasters took precautions against high winds and seas. But not everyone was alarmed.
It's going to snow tomorrow.
No, it's not.
It's not going to snow?
No, it's not.
You don't believe us?
No.
You don't trust us?
No.
What's it supposed to do in Rome this weekend?
They're saying somewhere between 5 and 8 inches starting sometime late tonight, if it holds up.
What do you think's going to happen, though?
I actually think there'll probably be 3 or 4 inches and it'll all melt.
Excuse me, is that a keg?
Well, yes, this is a keg.
Do you know that the storm of the century is heading this way?
Yes, this is how we wait out storms in Rehoboth.
They say this is going to be the storm of the century.
Yeah, I don't think so.
In Florida, there seemed to be even less cause for alarm. The worst of the storm was expected to pass to the north. In Deacle Beach, on the Gulf of Mexico, the Gaylord family was looking forward to a weekend reunion. Eager for a break, 13 family members of all ages converged on a seaside cottage.
The weather that day had been like 80 degrees, and everybody had planned to take off that weekend, so everybody decided to come on. They was calling for thunder showers and cold weather, but that wasn't a big thing.
We had come down to just to get away and spend some time together with each other and just enjoy, relax. It wasn't a big deal if it did rain and we didn't get to get out in the sun and start a suntan early and that sort of thing.
To the north, in the Great Smoky Mountains, a weather dispatch was received by Chief Ranger Jason Houck. The park was in the storm's path.
I think we were reasonably well prepared for the weather, but like a lot of people, I don't think we took the Weather Service literally. I think we knew that there was a very severe winter storm. We just didn't know there was a 100-year storm on the way.
It began gently, a steady, moist snowfall over much of the south. For many in the backcountry who hadn't heard the warnings, it came as a pleasant surprise.
Friday afternoon, the snow started about, gosh, I don't know, maybe 3 o'clock or so, and it was snowing quite heavily, but we really didn't think anything about it, because snow in March in the Smoky Mountains certainly is not a big deal.
We were kind of happy it wasn't raining. It was just light snow, and that, rain gets everything wet. Snow just you can brush off. So we were kind of happy about that, and we weren't wary of it at all. Just and I'd gone in on Wednesday, and there was no word of a storm, so we were completely unprepared.
And we hiked all day Friday up into the mountains, and We didn't get into our camp until really late at night on Friday. We put up the tarp and went right to sleep.
In the next few hours, while many slept unaware, a bitter cold and constant whiteness would descend over the eastern United States. The South experienced record snows in areas ill prepared to deal with them. Gale force winds would strike as temperatures plunged over 25 degrees. By midnight, the storm had spread over 700 miles and enveloped Washington. Here and in other major cities, the homeless and indigent were at risk. New York. It is 105 years to the day since the Great Blizzard of 1888 took some 200 lives here. The storm of the 20th century will not hit the city quite as hard, and there's plenty of warning. Other places are not so lucky. In Florida, the storm is intensifying at a rate unforeseen by weather experts.
After we got our suitcases unpacked and everybody kind of got settled in, we decided we'd sit down and play some poker, and we enjoyed that for several hours. The wind was blowing bad, and the wind always blows down here at the beach. It's not, it's not something that's unusual. We just didn't realize how much harder that it was going to blow.
Then the storm's squall line, far more lethal than predicted, whips eastward across Florida. Weathermen now realize much worse may be coming.
Bulletin, this is a tornado warning issued by the National Weather Service at 10:30 p.m. The National Weather Service has issued a tornado warning effective until 4:30 a.m. for people in
Tampa. For TV weatherman Steve Udelson, it's like watching a train wreck in slow motion. He sees what's happening, but is powerless to prevent it.
The thunderstorms came rolling in off the Gulf, and all the warnings went up for tornadoes. The problem was the hour, for one. I mean, it was already after 11 o'clock. A lot of folks were already tuned out for the night. And how do we get this message across? I mean, you can't just go banging on people's doors, hey, we've got these storms coming in. So we just stayed on the air as long as we could and just kept telling people, this is where the storm is now, this is where the thunderstorms are, this is dangerous stuff, you've got to watch out.
In a small trailer park in central Florida, Katrina Donaldson receives a late-night call from a friend.
My friend, she called me and told me there was a bad storm coming, but we didn't know it was going to be that bad. The rain that I heard just sounded like hard rain, but then I woke up and I remember looking at the clock and it was like 11 o'clock.
S-13 Ocala, due to the inclement weather, have all units gas up their vehicles and remain stationary due to the reports of tornadoes in the area.
1026. Approximately 11 o'clock, I was on patrol in this area, parked my patrol car under the overhang of the BP station and waited for further instructions. And while doing so, my patrol car started moving. My first impression was that someone came behind it, played a joke, and they were rocking the car up and down. But if I looked in my rearview mirror, there was nobody there, and that's when I realized the wind was getting real strong, so I got out of the car quickly, and I sought shelter inside the gas station. There's power lines sparking all around. There was power lines down and blue sparks. There was a lot of lightning, more lightning I've ever seen. It was just continuous lightning.
And I heard my bed was shaking, and I heard like a train coming through my window. And that's all I remember. I remember I thought my bed was shaking, but I guess I was flipping because something hit me in my head, and when I came to, I was outside. I guess my house flipped. I just thought everyone was dead.
3 of Katrina's neighbors died in the tornado, one of more than 50 that rip across Florida on this night, killing 18 people. In the Smoky Mountains, the relentless snow is silently creating a prison around the sleeping students.
We began to become worried as we heard tree limbs start to crash. So I crawled out, got my boots on and stepped out into the snow, not realizing that it was already about 1 or 2 feet deep, and just, it was amazing. It was as if we were on the moon.
Scattered in small groups, the students now find themselves on a class trip to the Ice Age. Miles away, Danielle Swank and her companions realize that their camping gear was not designed for this.
The boy next to me started shivering sometime in the middle of the night and couldn't stop. So the whole night, the person next to me was just shaking uncontrollably. And what's worse is the boy next to him on the outside, he was so cold that he stopped shivering. Twice during the night, somebody got up and removed all the snow from the tarp, because otherwise, we would have been sucking in plastic.
Now on the Gulf Coast, south winds generate massive waves. A dome of high water will turn into a towering wall as it approaches the coast. This is storm surge, probably the most deadly force of nature. Many Weather Service offices across the state have lost electric power. There are no flood warnings until it is too late.
The last weather report we got was that it was the bad weather was going to subside and the temperatures would be in the freezing, but the tornado watch was over, and this was about 3 o'clock or 3:30 in the morning, and at 5:30 that's whenever it really hit, the storm surge hit.
Shortly after that was when the electricity went off, and that's when it really began to get bad. The wind was just horrible.
Look at the waves.
We knew we was in serious trouble whenever we raised all the windows and all the doors to let the wind through. And the waves got so high that it busted the glass out of the windows. Then you could actually feel the house really moving.
We had to go get towels and put at the door, because that door on the south side, it was raining so hard out there, the water was just running into the door.
And I asked Pat, I said, what time is it? She looked at her watch, and it was 5:30. I said, well, we're going to have to go in just a minute because the house can't stand anymore.
I mean, the waves was just beating the pilings out from under the house.
We had stripped all the bed linens off and tied them in a rope-like fashion, and we wrapped them around each other's arms so we could all stay together, We knew it was going to be rough. But
we had no idea
it's going to be that bad. And whenever we jumped out, we waited till the house actually settled a little bit into the water before we jumped. And I was the first one in the water. Whenever we jumped, everybody had to go at the same time. But whenever you jumped, it was like jumping off into a washing machine.
"15 friends and family cling desperately to trees as the storm surge, almost 12 feet high, sweeps past.
And I can remember breathing water. I can remember feeling it go down into my lungs and not strangling on it. And it flabbergasted me to begin with, because I said, hey, I'm breathing water, And I always heard people say that drowning was an easy way to die. And that thought did come to my mind at that point, because I thought, well, this doesn't hurt, and I guess I'm fixing to die.
6 members of the close-knit family are dead. Pat's niece, Melinda, lost her mother, her husband, her 4-year-old son, and her infant daughter. All along the Florida Panhandle, the storm surge takes a heavy toll. By Saturday morning, storm clouds smothered almost the entire eastern half of the United States, from Florida to Maine. It is now the largest storm of the 20th century, over 25 times the size of Hurricane Andrew. In the Smoky Mountains, the snowfall is truly fantastic. In some places, more than 4 feet deep.
The next morning, we woke up to a completely different landscape. It was unbelievable, the difference.
We were all a little concerned that we had had a significant amount of snow come overnight, and we didn't know which way the weather was going to turn. So we spent the first morning digging out the tarps and resetting them and climbed back into the sleeping bags because we were unable to go anywhere.
So the community and the park were simply paralyzed. By that time, most power had been lost. Roads were absolutely impassable by almost any kind of vehicle. We did have a number of younger folks that we knew to be lost in the park. Even though we felt very, very good about our likelihood of finding them, the weather again was a huge factor, and we were unable to do the flying that we needed to do to get those folks out.
We got everyone together and we started to hike out, and we tried to progress on, but we couldn't, so we decided at that point it would be better to go back to the camp, which we knew, and set up camp there and just wait out the storm.
If people hunkered down in shelters and in their tents and didn't try heroic measures, we would find them and we could get them out of there.
We awoke to a problem, and the only solution that we saw was to hike back out. We knew that there was a phone and a ranger station, far down the trail, but we knew where it was. In places, the snow is chest high. In general, it ranged from your knees to your waist. It was miserable going. We had one girl who kept saying, "We're gonna die, we're gonna die, we're gonna die, we're gonna die." And, I probably said it a couple times too. Everybody was frightened, they were panicked. It was not a situation that any of us were prepared to deal with.
Things are not much better in the streets of Atlanta. The city stops dead in its tracks. Those few who venture onto the streets soon forget their errands and find themselves struggling for mere survival.
Right now, the whole city of Atlanta is under a blizzard warning. It's one of the first blizzard warnings they've had in the entire city's history. Everybody is driving around town just running red lights because you can get away with it. The police are so busy trying to urge people not to drive on the streets here.
The extremely low air pressure that comes with the storm is blamed in some places for a sudden outbreak of childbirths. The baby boom could not come at a worse time.
911.
911, what is your emergency?
We'll get somebody up there. Is she having a baby now? Is she in labor? Okay, we'll get somebody up there. Stay on the line with me, sir.
Emergency teams on rescue missions have to be rescued themselves. Some people freeze to death in doorways. By Saturday afternoon, Atlanta's Hartsfield Airport, the transportation hub of the South, is like a great frozen wheel. It is the beginning of the worst logistical nightmare in aviation history. Already, thousands are stranded.
We're pretty much booked up. I think there's one at 8 o'clock tonight we may be able to get your reservation on.
Over much of the South, hardly anything moves on highways for 3 days. Thousands of motorists were still stranded by Saturday afternoon. Many had spent the night huddled in their cars. Now they seek shelter, refugees in a strange, cruel land.
Passengers on this bus spent the night waiting for help. When help failed to arrive after nearly 8 hours, one of the passengers with a sick infant asked us to help. As we made our way down Highway 31 to Brookwood Medical Center, Vestavia firefighters stopped us seeking help with a pregnant woman. She'd gone into labor, and their vehicle was stuck in the snow. An Alabama power crew with snow chains offered to help, but a short distance down the road, they became stuck. The expectant mother transferred to our truck for the rest of the ride. We didn't make it all of the way, and the firemen carried her the rest of the way on foot.
The doctor and the two nurses met us halfway. Didn't know us or anything. They just got out there and fought the blizzard and helped us back and got this little one in here safely.
Public shelters are jammed. Most people assumed it was just for the night, but the storm's persistence would keep them here for days. In the Smokies, Danielle Swank's group continues the treacherous descent down the mountain.
I was in the back of the group with Mr. Woodruff, and he wasn't doing well at all. He was falling down, taking a couple paces, falling down again, not really able to keep going or to do anything. I called for the rest of the group to stop, and one person did. My friend Rob stopped. We had a brief conversation, and he said he'd run ahead and he'd get the rest of the group and make them stop. We started to follow along the trail, just thinking that the rest of the group was just a little bit up. But, you know, they weren't, it turns out. They panicked. Nobody stopped. We went on as far as we could, and then I just had to stop. So Mr. Woodruff and I were out on the side of the mountain by ourselves.
News Radio 88. All news. All day, all night.
In this killer storm pummeling us now, 8 people are known dead in the south. It stretches from the Carolinas all the way to New England. Coastal flooding and beach erosion as winds gust to hurricane force, with the worst still to come. All the airports closed in our area.
The nation's capital is not much better off than cities to the south. Those who venture out find few streets cleared and none sanded. For drivers unaccustomed to these conditions, it is a whole new world. But officials try to cope. A few plows are deployed, and a no parking ban is strictly enforced. Not that anyone can go anywhere. In New York, it is not so much the snowfall, but the wind that causes problems, blowing up to 70 miles an hour in overnight temperatures of 15 degrees. The city's skyscrapers prove surprisingly vulnerable. Gale force winds blow out their windows, raining large sheets of glass and metal on the streets below. The shards are tossed by the wind like huge daggers. In Boston, the city faces its own storm-related catastrophe. For the first time in history, the St. Patrick's Day Parade is postponed. In Pittsburgh, however, the show must go on.
No, this is what life is all about.
That's right, absolutely.
This is what life is all about.
We wouldn't miss St. Patrick's Day Parade for anything.
No.
As monster waves pound the Atlantic coast, what happened in Florida a few hours ago prompts immediate action.
We are live on the beach at Dewey Beach, where they have just ordered a mandatory evacuation along the coastline, and they were concerned and they started evacuating for this reason, because the water is rushing up now and because they know it will get much worse.
Eventually, tens of thousands were evacuated along the eastern seaboard. On Long Island, this proved especially wise. as 18 homes were swept out to sea. But favorable winds moderated the storm surge, sparing the Atlantic coastline worse devastation. In the Smoky Mountains, Danielle Swank and James Woodruff prepared for the night.
I got one boot off, but I couldn't get the other boot off. I had big chunks of ice on my laces and on my cuffs, but it was frozen. I couldn't remove it. So I just got in a sleeping bag like that. And so that's where we spent the night, on the side of the mountain.
On Sunday, the whole Northeast was buried in snow. It had frozen in the night, creating huge icy monuments to the storm. Plows cleared streets only to make sidewalks impassable. Shoveling snow caused countless heart attacks, the majority of the storm's fatalities. Hundreds of miles to the south, Danielle Swank faced her 9th day in the wilderness.
Sunday morning, the boot that I got off, we couldn't get back on. It had frozen solid over the night. So I stuck there. I couldn't move. We still just thought the group was just, maybe 1 or 2 miles ahead. Maybe they'd come back when we didn't show up. Maybe they'd come back first, but, maybe not. Or maybe Mr. Woodruff would just go down the trail a little bit and then meet the party coming up. But when Mr. Woodruff hiked down the trail a little bit, he only got a couple 100 yards into the woods, just far enough away so I couldn't see him anymore, and then he collapsed.
Another miserable night would pass before the weather allowed a search for the students to begin. On Monday morning, park rangers were joined by the Tennessee Emergency Management Agency. Together, they determined where to begin their rescue effort. There were well over 200 people still stranded in the backcountry. Most were scattered over 500 square miles. Helicopters were brought in from the National Guard and Army airborne units. The teams would search every vehicle, cabin, and campsite spotted from the air. Medics like Sergeant Brian Fall would give emergency first aid to survivors.
It was like, wow, do we have enough here to handle this? How long is this going to take? How many people are we going to find not make it? Are we going to find everybody? It was just a big, intense operation, and you've seen it a whole new perspective when you was up in the air.
To cover the large area, the helicopters would fly almost continuously throughout the day. It was one of the biggest peacetime search and rescue operations in U.S. history. Hikers in large groups were the easiest to spot, especially those who had remained close to camp. For the first students rescued, cold, hunger, and fear gave way to joy and even a sense of triumph. But on Monday afternoon, most of the students were still missing. Those who were alone or in pairs would be the most difficult to find.
We seen what looked like a blue windbreaker. They hoisted me down, and once I got there was Danielle. I don't know how long she had been there, but she was experiencing somewhat of hypothermia. She needed to get to the hospital now. And once we got her to the hospital and got her dropped off and stuff, the doctor had said, hey, she only had, between a half hour and an hour, or she would have probably not made it.
Woodruff, too, was in serious condition, his feet completely encrusted in ice. But most of the students had come through well, suffering little more than exhaustion, a touch of frostbite, and a measure of fear.
Mom? I'm scared, Mom. I'm okay now. Yes.
Despite all she endured, Danielle Swank displayed a remarkable resilience.
Right now, I'm probably going to lose part of my toes on the right foot, but everything else, and maybe some of the nerves in my hands and my both feet. But besides that, it's not that bad.
You're in incredibly good spirits, considering what you've been through and what you're facing.
All over the East, clearing up and cleaning out was a massive undertaking. Every major eastern city had snowpack measured in feet, not inches. The amount of snow that fell from the sky was astonishing. Melted, it would be enough to submerge the entire state of New York under a foot of water. Soon, Americans were on the move again. But the colossal storm left a vivid memory and some 270 dead, 3 times the toll of Hurricanes Hugo and Andrew combined. Economic losses were measured in the billions, but it could have been so much worse. Weathermen felt both pride and humility after the event.
With storms such as this storm of the century, I think we do have to be careful that we don't get too smug as forecasters and as scientists that we've got things really figured out.
No matter how well we can predict this, we can't stop it from occurring.
If we had control of it, meteorologists would make a lot more money than professional sports players make.
But we don't have that long a period of recorded history as far as climatology goes. There could be a superstorm that is worse than this, that gives us more snow.
We are just now at the beginning of our understanding of the way the atmosphere works. And it's going to be a long, long time before we'll be able to call a storm like this to the T, if ever.
We recognize that the forecast for this superstorm was not perfect, that we had problems in Florida. But when you look at the entire forecast performance, we attained a level of credibility we never had before, and we haven't lost since that particular forecast. People took action based on our forecast, and they take action today. And that's the future. That's the challenge for us.
For all of its fury, the storm of the century brought significant advances to the science of prediction. The computer revolution in weather forecasting is just beginning. Soon, perhaps, weather experts will be able to take a virtual walk into the very heart of a storm system. Already, we've seen results in the remarkable long-range forecast of El Niño conditions in 1997. Infrared imagery from satellites provided indications of oceanic warming at the surface. Weather buoys confirmed the data, taking temperature readings at various depths. Finally, computers generated stunning graphic imagery of oceanic hotspots. This was a weather phenomenon of global proportions, with effects we are only beginning to document. From starving baby sea lions in California to raging fires caused by severe droughts in Australia and Southeast Asia. And in America, severe weather that has been, until now perhaps, unpredictable. Floods, blizzards, and severe Pacific hurricanes. Perhaps the storm of the century was a turning point, but its devastating power showed once more that weather may be predicted, but not controlled. For some, this basic truth has intensely personal meaning.
Life goes on, but it leaves its mark too whenever, you go through something like this, and it makes you appreciate the time you do have with family because, nothing's for certain anymore. We miss all of them. We miss them desperately. But, at least it didn't get all of us. There's some of us, we're able to still have each other and hold on to each other. And we just remember the good times that we had with the ones that we lost.
National Geographic is sponsored in part by Chrysler, built on the belief that great cars appeal to a more passionate side. Chrysler, engineered to be great cars.